Some people book an Airbnb for relaxation. Others treat it like a courtroom where physics, logic, and common sense are all optional. And somehow, the real madness hasn't even started. 1. A guest once complained that the Airbnb lied about having natural sunlight because the sunrise entered the window at an angle they personally found disrespectful, as if the host controlled the Earth's rotation like a bored Greek god. The guest insisted the listing should have warned them that the sun would not rise in a perfectly symmetrical line across the bed, and they demanded a refund because the morning light made the room feel judgmental. They even included diagrams, which were just stick figures squinting. The host tried explaining that astronomy is not an optional feature that can be toggled in the settings menu, but the guest doubled down, claiming the unpredictable direction of sunlight caused emotional turbulence. They left a 1-star review titled, "The sun was wrong," a sentence that tells you everything you need to know about their relationship with reality. 2. One traveler filed a furious complaint because the Airbnb's forest location contained too many trees, which they accused the host of planting specifically to sabotage their GPS signal. According to their logic, if we can call it that, the host strategically arranged decades-old pine trees to interfere with their phone the moment they tried to watch a movie in the hot tub. They demanded a full refund, compensation for emotional distress, and an apology from the forest itself, which unfortunately was unavailable for comment. They also suggested the host cut down at least 70% of the unnecessary nature, because the trees were blocking the wind, and they could feel the stillness judging them. That's right, they claimed the air was stuck. The host politely informed them that the woods existed before the house, but the guest insisted that was impossible because no one would build a home somewhere this uncooperative. 3. A couple once left a scathing complaint claiming the Airbnb bed was too quiet, which they believed indicated a structural flaw in the mattress's personality. They complained that the bed didn't make any noise when sat on, which convinced them it wasn't real wood, and therefore the entire rental was a scam. When the host explained that silent furniture is usually considered a selling point, they refused to accept it, insisting that every authentic bed should creak a little for ambiance. They even accused the host of creating a soundless sleeping trap, which they described as eerie and untrustworthy, like sleeping on a ghost. The best part, they said the mattress was suspiciously comfortable and therefore probably infused with chemicals to manipulate REM cycles. They wanted a refund because the bed didn't behave like the ones they were used to in budget motels, an unintentional confession that explained more than anything else in their message. 4. One guest became outraged when they discovered the cabin's Wi-Fi temporarily slowed during a thunderstorm, something they interpreted not as weather but as targeted harassment. Their complaint accused the host of tampering with the atmosphere to throttle internet speeds, as though rural homeowners run side gigs as storm wizards. They insisted the host should have kept the sky stable because they were trying to stream an old sitcom as a self-care ritual. When the host explained that storms disrupt signals, the guest responded with a triumphant, "That's not my problem," which is the unofficial motto of every person determined to be wrong at maximum volume. They demanded a refund because the thunder interfered with their emotional journey and claimed the rain felt louder than what a normal cloud should produce. They also added that the lightning gave the impression the house was blinking, which apparently violated their expectation of a stationary building. 5. A city dweller checked into a quiet rural Airbnb and immediately filed a complaint because the night sky contained too many stars, creating what they described as visual clutter. They said the stars were distracting, aggressive, and too sparkly, as though someone had turned on an unwanted cosmic disco. They insisted the host should provide curtains strong enough to block astronomical interference, and claimed the galaxy was overstimulating their sleep chakra, a phrase scientists have yet to endorse. Their final demand was a partial refund for light pollution in reverse, because the stars were ruining the minimalist darkness they had paid for. When the host gently explained that stars come free with the universe and cannot be dimmed like a lamp, the guest responded with a defeated but still angry message. "Well, you could have at least told me the sky is brighter out here." Truly a tragic victim of the Milky Way. 6. A guest emailed the host claiming the cabin's wooden floors were too authentic a phrase that immediately raised philosophical questions the host did not have the emotional bandwidth to unpack. The complaint stated the planks made them feel like they were walking inside history, which apparently triggered a fear of pioneer ghosts. They insisted the host should have modernized the wood to be less wooden, or coated it with something that makes it feel more 21st century and less like a museum of pioneer trauma. They demanded a refund because the floors held ancestral energy, which they believed was responsible for a dream they had involving a horse. They also complained the creaks sounded like the house was narrating their movements, something they felt was an invasion of privacy. The host, exercising heroic restraint, chose not to ask how they expected wood floors to behave, perhaps with Bluetooth connectivity and a calmer emotional presence. 7. One disgruntled guest filed a multi-paragraph manifesto accusing the host of false advertising because the property description said quiet neighborhood, yet they heard a bird at 6:12 a.m. Not birds, a bird, a single feathered criminal. They insisted that any sound, even one produced by nature's smallest musicians, violated their expectation of total acoustic purity. They demanded the host discipline the wildlife, which is a fascinating sentence, suggesting they believe rural homeowners run underground bird obedience schools. They claimed the bird's chirps felt personal, as if it had selected them from a global menu of targets. They closed with a threat to leave a negative review unless someone guaranteed no more unexpected bird activity, which is exactly the kind of demand that reveals someone's long and complicated history with reality. The host kindly offered earplugs, but the guest rejected them, saying, "I shouldn't have to adapt. Nature should." 8. A group of travelers left a lengthy complaint accusing the host of emotional manipulation because the welcome basket contained snacks they personally did not enjoy. They argued the host chose those items specifically to control the vibe of their vacation, which is a stunning accusation against a bag of trail mix. They said the granola bar was too wholesome, the chocolate was too strategic, and the sparkling water implied a lifestyle they were not ready to commit to. They suggested the host should have conducted a pre-arrival personality analysis to determine snacks that aligned with their core identity. Instead of eating the items or ignoring them, they placed them back in the basket and took pictures from multiple angles as evidence of culinary disrespect. Their refund request listed psychological discomfort due to unaligned snack energy, proving once again that some people should not be allowed around grocery stores without a therapist on standby. 9. A guest lodged a formal complaint stating the Airbnb houseplant looked at them funny, which raised immediate concerns about their understanding of botany. They said the plant's leaves were angled in a judgmental pose, and that its pot was too confident for something that doesn't even walk. They insisted the host remove all foliage before their next stay, because they don't vibe with vegetation that acts superior. The plant in question was a small pothos whose most active behavior was photosynthesis, but the guest claimed it kept looming, which is impressive considering it stood 8 inches tall. They demanded a refund because the plant created a hostile emotional climate, which they believed affected their ability to enjoy breakfast. The host offered to move the plant, but the guest refused, saying the plant would remember the insult and plot revenge, a courageous stance against the chlorophyll menace. 10. One customer was deeply offended that the host provided only organic soap, which they described as suspiciously natural and therefore dishonest. They claimed the soap's ingredient list read like a garden, and that a proper cleansing product should contain at least one chemical name that sounds like a password reset prompt. They were convinced the soap's mild scent made the shower feel too gentle, and argued that real cleanliness requires the sting of artificial fragrance and the comforting burn of mystery substances. They threatened to leave a negative review unless the host replaced the bars with something from a brand that acknowledges the importance of synthetic superiority. Their refund demand itemized emotional discomfort due to Earth-themed hygiene, which may be the first time nature itself has been accused of false advertising. The host considered explaining that mild soap is generally preferred, but wisely decided anyone who distrusts aloe probably isn't open to discussion. 11. A guest complained that the Airbnb driveway sloped at an unfair angle, which they believed constituted a personal attack on their self-esteem. They claimed the incline made their car feel judged, as though asphalt can develop opinions. They insisted the host modify the driveway to be more emotionally neutral, ideally flat enough to support the confidence of all vehicles regardless of horsepower. They added that walking up the slope made them feel like gravity was mocking them, which they considered a hostile environment. Their refund request included an accusation that the driveway discriminated against leg day skip pers, which is certainly a fresh take on topography. The host gently explained that altering the slope would require disassembling the earth, but the guest maintained that homeowners are responsible for providing terrain that supports a balanced psychological landscape. Truly, the war between humans and angles continues. 12. One visitor left an indignant review declaring the Airbnb suffered from unapproved wind, which they believed was not included in the listing and therefore should not have existed. They claimed a breeze hit them while they were drinking coffee outside, which they interpreted as the host allowing weather to roam freely without supervision. They requested a refund for unexpected atmospheric behavior and recommended the host invest in equipment to control air movements for guest comfort, as if fans and patio heaters were part of a larger meteorological dictatorship. They also accused the wind of interrupting their thoughts, which they said caused a noticeable decline in personal productivity. The host suggested moving indoors, a solution the guest described as emotionally invalidating because they wanted outdoor serenity with indoor stability. A reasonable dream, tragically denied by the existence of nature. 13. A woman sent a furious message claiming the host's refrigerator felt hostile because it made a soft hum she interpreted as mechanical disapproval. She insisted the appliance had a toxic energy that ruined her ability to enjoy yogurt. She argued the fridge's cooling power was too assertive, like it was trying to outperform her. Her proposed solution was that the host either replace the refrigerator with a quieter, less judgmental model or provide her with noise-canceling headphones specifically for snack time. She demanded compensation for refrigerator-induced anxiety, claiming the appliance stared at her with its handles, which is a sentence that demands several hours of reflection. The host offered to turn the fridge down slightly, but the guest declined because adjusting it would only encourage the machine. Humanity, 0. Whirlpool, 114. A guest once complained that the host's fireplace generated heat without consent, which is arguably the most literal misunderstanding of fire in recorded history. They insisted the flames were too enthusiastic, making the living room feel pushy and overfamiliar. They wanted the host to tone down the fire's personality, as if it were an extroverted coworker who needed HR intervention. Their refund request claimed the fireplace violated their thermal boundaries because the warmth reached them from across the room. They believed fire should stay in its lane, which, scientifically speaking, is a request last honored in prehistoric times. They added that the crackling noises made them feel like the fire was trying to start a conversation, which they did not appreciate. The host recommended simply not lighting the fireplace, but the guest insisted the mere possibility of heat made them uncomfortable. Hard to argue with logic that volatile. 15. A man left a furious review accusing the host of installing dishonest mirrors because the reflection didn't match his expectations of what he should look like on vacation. He claimed the mirror was slightly warped, but the host later confirmed the mirror was normal, and the man simply had unrealistic ambitions for his face. He said the mirror felt smug, which is an impressive characterization of something that reflects reality with perfect neutrality. He demanded a refund because the mirror projected negative energy about his jawline and insisted the host replace it with a more flattering model that understands lighting and angles. He seemed deeply invested in the idea that the furnishings should conform to his self-esteem, not physics. The host declined because replacing reality is not part of the cleaning fee. 16. A guest reported that the Airbnb couch sat too confidently, claiming its firmness conveyed an attitude they found confrontational. They accused the cushions of refusing to welcome them emotionally, stating the couch felt like it had boundaries, which apparently is unacceptable furniture behavior. They said the couch made them feel uninvited in their own temporary home and demanded upholstery that understands softness on a personal level. Their refund request alleged psychological tension caused by furniture posture, which is exactly the sort of phrase that makes therapists open a fresh notebook. The host offered extra throw pillows, but the guest rejected them, saying the pillows felt like bribes from a guilty couch. A true tragedy of textile diplomacy. 17. One guest insisted the Airbnb provided unfair water because the shower pressure did not match their personal ideal of motivational intensity. They argued the water was too gentle, making them feel unsupported in their cleansing journey. They said the shower should encourage ambition, preferably with a pressure setting that rallies the spirit like a halftime speech. They demanded a refund for uninspiring hydration and claimed the host should advertise the water pressure using emotional metrics, such as whether the shower awakens your inner champion or just gets you wet. They also said the water temperature changed too gradually, which they interpreted as indecisiveness. The host offered to adjust the setting, but the guest declined, declaring the shower had already made a first impression it couldn't take back. 18. A guest once complained that the Airbnb's ceiling fan rotated with suspicious confidence, which they believed suggested an ulterior motive, as though the fan wasn't content with its humble mission of moving air and instead aspired to a career in psychological warfare. They claimed the blades spun at a speed that implied secrets and insisted the host disclose whether the fan had been briefed on their stay, whatever that means. And the guest even said the airflow felt targeted, like the fan had singled them out for some personal vendetta involving temperature control. When the host suggested simply turning the fan off, the guest accused them of dismissing the emotional impact of rotating objects and said they couldn't sleep knowing a mechanical device was hovering overhead with unearned confidence. Truly, a brave stance against the only appliance in the house capable of creating a breeze without starting an argument. 19. One traveler wrote a review declaring that the Airbnb's toaster lacked ambition because it didn't brown the bread with the enthusiasm they felt a proper toaster should possess. They claimed the device seemed bored, which apparently manifested as a perfectly normal toasting time, and they interpreted this lack of fiery passion as deliberate laziness on the toaster's part, accusing it of settling for mediocrity and projecting low self-esteem onto breakfast, as if bread cares. They demanded the host replace it with a model that embraces purpose and toasts like it means it, insisting that a passive appliance could ruin the momentum of a morning. And they even alleged the toaster's lack of urgency caused them to reflect too deeply on their own stalled goals, meaning this person projected their entire career uncertainty onto a kitchen gadget that just wanted to warm up a bagel without becoming someone's life coach. 20. A guest left a dramatic complaint that the property's front door opened too confidently, describing the door's hinge movement as aggressively sure of itself, which made them feel overpowered upon entry, like the house was trying to establish dominance in the relationship. They said the door swung wider than they emotionally anticipated, and this unexpected hospitality created a disorienting dynamic, causing them to question whether the house respected boundaries. And they even suggested the door's decisive motion challenged their sense of personal authority, which is a fascinating battle to pick with an inanimate rectangle. When the host explained that smooth hinges are typically considered a positive, the guest insisted the door should introduce itself more gently and demanded a refund for unexpected assertiveness in architectural design, setting a new standard for people who feel threatened by objects that dare to function properly. 21. A visitor filed a complaint claiming the Airbnb's outdoor bench lied about being comfortable, even though benches historically have never made promises to anyone about anything. They said the wood looked emotionally supportive, but when they sat down, it felt more like an uninterested acquaintance, and they insisted the bench had misrepresented its intentions, accusing the host of staging the bench to appear softer than it really was, like some kind of shallow wooden influencer using filters. They demanded a refund because they spent 8 entire minutes attempting to bond with a piece of furniture that clearly wasn't invested, blaming the bench for their failure to achieve relaxation, and they even recommended the host include a disclaimer explaining that the bench is not responsible for unmet emotional expectations, proving once again that some travelers show up hoping every object on the property is prepared to participate in their personal healing art. 22. One couple complained that the Airbnb kitchen smelled too clean, claiming the absence of any detectable aroma made them uneasy, like the kitchen was trying too hard to hide its past, as though disinfectant had something to apologize for. They said the air felt sterile and secretive, and argued that a kitchen should smell authentically lived in, preferably with faint notes of heritage and warm memories, which translated to, "We wanted a cozy vibe, but also spotless counters." a request that has never existed in nature. They speculated the host overcleaned intentionally, creating an environment they described as emotionally unseasoned, and they demanded a refund because the kitchen felt unfamiliar with joy, which is a poetic way of saying they missed the scent of someone else's leftovers. The host considered suggesting they cook something, but wisely accepted that no casserole would satisfy travelers determined to romanticize household odors. 23. A guest once insisted the host compensate them because the local wildlife refused to interact, stating, without irony, that the squirrels outside were unacceptably standoffish, as if the animals had received a memo instructing them to limit guest engagement. The guest said they rattled a bag of peanuts to initiate a bonding moment, but the squirrels ignored their invitation, which they interpreted as a personal slight, accusing the animals of performing disinterest in a way that bordered on rude. They expected the host to train the wildlife to be more welcoming, a sentence that instantly reveals the exact kind of person who tries to negotiate with nature. And they demanded a partial refund for lack of magical woodland interactions, reinforcing the idea that some visitors expect a Disney forest when in reality they're dealing with creatures who have zero interest in becoming supporting characters in a stranger's vacation fantasy. 24. A solo traveler left a review claiming the Airbnb curtains were too emotional, stating the fabric draped in a way that suggested melancholy, and the folds created a sense of lingering sorrow, which allegedly affected their mood. They argued the curtains held unresolved feelings, and that the host should have selected window coverings with a more uplifting narrative, as though textiles come with backstories. They also claimed the curtains whispered disappointment when the wind moved them, and that no one should be expected to rest in a room where fabric projects unresolved tension, and they wanted a refund because they did not sign up to confront heavy drapery energy, which might be the first time someone has accused polyester of emotional manipulation. The host offered to tie back the curtains, but the guest declined, saying the gesture felt performative, proving even Decor is not safe from travelers looking to assign psychological motives to inanimate threads. 25. A guest left a long, distressed complaint that the Airbnb kettle heated water too quickly, which they interpreted as aggressive enthusiasm, claiming the appliance's efficiency made them feel pressured to decide things faster, including what tea to drink and, apparently, how to navigate their life. They said the kettle betrayed no sense of pacing, heating at a speed they considered emotionally overwhelming, and they suspected the host purchased the model specifically to rush guests, which is quite an accusation to level at a household appliance known for doing exactly one job. They demanded a refund for accelerated emotional tempo, stating the kettle forced them to confront the fragility of time, which is a lot of existential weight to place on boiling water. The host suggested they simply wait longer before pouring, but the guest claimed they could feel the kettle's impatience, completing their tragic feud with kitchen efficiency. 26. A particularly dramatic guest insisted the Airbnb walls were too silent, describing the quiet as suspicious, like the house was listening but refusing to participate. And they said the lack of ambient noise created an unsettling emotional vacuum, making them feel like the walls were judging their thoughts, which must be exhausting for everyone involved. They said the silence was thick enough to hear their own insecurities, and believed the host intentionally soundproofed the house to amplify existential dread, a business strategy no hospitality expert has ever recommended. They wanted the host to add friendly background noises, preferably something that implies life but not too much life, and suggested piping in neutral, supportive ambience, like the soft hum of a refrigerator that believes in you. When the host recommended turning on a fan, the guest said artificial noise lacked sincerity, revealing that even acoustic preferences can become overcomplicated in the hands of a determined overthinker. 27. One visitor submitted a formal complaint that the Airbnb's backyard grass was too green, arguing the color felt unrealistic and suspiciously vibrant, like the lawn was trying to send a message about its superiority. They accused the host of inflating the grass's hue for marketing purposes, as if the lawn had been photoshopped in real life, and they said the brightness made them self-conscious about their own lack of gardening discipline, which isn't the lawn's fault, but definitely sounds like something they've avoided confronting for years. They demanded a refund because the grass looked artificial even though it wasn't, and said nature shouldn't show off. especially in ways that challenge a guest's sense of personal accomplishment. The host tried explaining that healthy grass is, in fact, green, but the guest insisted the lawn was performing too hard, concluding that the yard felt competitive, possibly the first recorded instance of someone losing a confidence battle to chlorophyll. 28. A guest once complained that the Airbnb's bedside lamp produced light with an attitude, describing the glow as smug and overly confident, which is remarkable, considering it was just a standard LED bulb doing exactly what bulbs do. They said the light illuminated the room in a way that felt condescending, as though revealing objects was an act of criticism, and they even accused the lamp of interrogating their life choices, simply because it was brighter than they preferred. They demanded a dimmer switch to soften the judgmental energy, and insisted that the lamp knew too much, despite never explaining what, exactly, the lamp was accused of witnessing. The host suggested unplugging it, but the guest declined, claiming the lamp's residual aura would continue to bother them even when powered off, which is an impressive belief system for someone who clearly fears the emotional honesty of household lighting. 29. A traveler complained that the Airbnb shower tiles were too geometrically aggressive, claiming the sharp angles made them feel challenged before they'd even had coffee, and insisting the pattern activated their anxiety about math, which apparently is something tiles are now responsible for. They said the grid-like layout reminded them of deadlines and accused the tiles of over-organizing the space, creating a bathroom experience that felt like taking a test. And they demanded the host install tiles with gentler, less assertive shapes, ideally something emotionally rounded, like circles or clouds. They argued the current tiles were too punctual, whatever that means, and even suggested the grout lines stared at them with rigid expectations, transforming a normal shower into an architectural hostage situation. The host wisely did not attempt to explain that tiles do not possess psychological agendas or expectations, though one can admire the guest's unwavering commitment to overthinking rectangles. 30. A guest wrote a highly dramatic message claiming the Airbnb smoke detector watched them, describing the small plastic device as uncomfortably observant because it sat on the ceiling in a place no object should be that attentive. They said the detector's little test button looked like a judgmental eye, which made them feel evaluated, and they insisted the host cover it with a cloth, ignoring the small detail that covering smoke detectors is a terrible idea for reasons even the mildly safety-aware would grasp. They claimed the device's mere presence created emotional surveillance, and demanded a refund because they couldn't be themselves under the unblinking gaze of fire safety, which may be the strangest feud a person has ever picked with an object whose closest flirtation with sentience is the occasional beep. The host declined the request, presumably hoping the guest eventually finds a ceiling they feel safe under. 31. A guest once declared the Airbnb towels too soft, complaining that the plush texture made them feel unprepared for the hardships of the day, as though absorbent cotton was sabotaging their psychological resilience. They said the towels felt luxurious in a way that undermined their sense of grit, accusing the host of creating a bathroom environment too pampered to be relatable, and they demanded rougher towels that remind a person of life's natural struggles, specifically suggesting something with more abrasive honesty, like sandpaper's emotionally distant cousin. They insisted soft towels caused them to lose touch with reality, and said the gentle fabric weakened their character, which is a fascinating revelation about a person who clearly needs adversity, but not enough to find it outside the linen closet. The host opted not to reply, possibly out of fear the guest would next accuse the toilet paper of excessive compassion. 32. A traveler sent an irate message claiming the Airbnb refrigerator was too cold, which is a bold criticism of an appliance whose entire purpose is literally cold. They argued the fridge took its job too seriously, chilling items with a zeal that bordered on intimidation, and they claimed this overperformance made their leftovers feel unwelcome, as though the refrigerator was staging a frosty coup. They demanded the host dial back the fridge's ambition, asserting food should be kept in an environment of comfortable moderation, where things are cool but not shivering from professional pressure, and they suggested the refrigerator should be less competitive with winter, which is a sentence the English language was never meant to handle. The host recommended adjusting the temperature dial, but the guest said the fridge wouldn't respect the change, cementing their belief that appliance insubordination is alive and well. 33. One baffled guest accused the Airbnb's carpet of being too neutral, stating the beige tone lacked emotional direction, which made it difficult for them to feel anchored in the space. They argued the carpet provided no narrative guidance, leaving them adrift in an environment without a strong identity. And they suggested the host choose flooring that participates more actively in the room's story, ideally something with opinions, because apparently carpets are now responsible for psychological clarity. They demanded a refund because the muted color didn't inspire anything, and they felt the carpet avoided commitment, which is a stunning interpretation of an inanimate surface designed for walking. The host responded that carpets do not, in fact, express identity, but the guest insisted the flooring felt emotionally absent, revealing a truly impressive ability to assign personality flaws to textiles that have never once attempted self-expression. 34. A guest lodged a complaint that the Airbnb's outdoor patio felt too outdoorsy, claiming the air, sounds, and general atmosphere leaned too heavily into the concept of being outside, which apparently conflicted with their vision of patio relaxation. They said the breeze asserted itself, the distant birds refused to lower their volume, and the natural light took unnecessary creative liberties, all of which they found overwhelmingly authentic. They demanded the host curate the outdoor environment more thoughtfully, perhaps by installing walls, muffling the sky, or negotiating with the sun for a more subtle performance. Their refund request cited excessive nature density, which may be the most poetic misunderstanding of fresh air on record. The host offered an indoor seating option, but the guests declined, saying they wanted to sit outside without experiencing the consequences of being outside, a breathtaking expectation even by Airbnb standards. 35. A pair of guests once complained that the Airbnb pillows showed favoritism, claiming the pillow on the left side of the bed felt more supportive and emotionally available, while the pillow on the right had a cold, distant personality, which allegedly caused tension in their relationship because one partner felt the other was receiving preferential cushioning. They said the pillows were clearly not manufactured with equal enthusiasm, an accusation that suggests someone out there believes factory workers infuse bedding with personal grudges, and they demanded the host replace both pillows with models that treat all sleepers with the same encouragement, because nothing says romance like arguing over fabric empathy. They even suggested the house may have a pillow hierarchy, a concept that truly deserves its own nature documentary. 36. A guest once insisted the Airbnb's washing machine was too honest because the spin cycle made unapologetically loud noises, which they interpreted as the machine airing out its frustrations. And they complained that the washer's willingness to express itself created an overwhelming atmosphere of emotional transparency, which they weren't prepared to deal with while traveling. They claimed the machine revealed too much about its internal struggles, citing the rhythmic thumping as evidence that it needed counseling, and they suggested the host replace it with a model that knows how to keep personal issues private, because apparently even appliances are expected to maintain fierce emotional boundaries now. Their refund request said the washer overshared, marking perhaps the only time in recorded history anyone has accused a laundry machine of trauma dumping. 37. A family reported that the Airbnb backyard tree was too tall, alleging that its height asserted dominance over guests, casting a shadow that felt hierarchical and condescending. And they argued that the tree's presence created an imbalance of authority, which is apparently a problem when dealing with vegetation that predates their existence by 2 decades. They demanded the host shorten the tree to a more respectful height, something between humble and approachable, as if trees are expected to tailor themselves to human insecurity. They also claimed the branches gestured in a disapproving manner when the wind blew, suggesting the tree lacked neutral body language, and their refund request said the foliage exhibited elitist behavior, which is a breathtaking example of someone losing a confidence battle to botany for the second time this list. 38. A guest sent a furious message claiming the Airbnb rug lied about its texture, because it looked plush in photos but felt surprisingly straightforward in person, which they described as a betrayal of visual trust. They said the rug had promised softness but delivered only adequacy, accusing it of false advertising through photography, as though the rug had staged a glamour shot with lighting tricks and a publicist. They demanded compensation for unexpected emotional honesty because the rug forced them to confront the limits of surface-level assumptions, and they insisted the host replace it with a rug that embraces the truth of its identity, whatever spiritual journey that entails. The host declined, probably because rugs are not typically held responsible for existential disappointments, no matter how many people are determined to make them the villain of their vacation. 39. One traveler filed a complaint that the host's silverware didn't reflect their face correctly, claiming the spoons created a distorted version of their identity, which made breakfast emotionally strenuous. They accused the utensils of warping their self-perception, as though stainless steel is obligated to provide confidence-boosting reflections, and they demanded the host replace the entire set with validation-forward cutlery, which they described as utensils that honor the eater's truth, a phrase that genuinely deserves to be studied under a microscope. They said the distortion undermined their emotional momentum for the day, and that a spoon should support the user, not critique them at an angle, proving that no reflective surface is safe from people desperate to avoid a mildly curved image of their own face. 40. A guest complained that the Airbnb vacuum cleaner looked too judgmental, stating the rigid handle and upright posture projected superiority, and they resented how the appliance stood in the corner like it knew things about them. They claimed the vacuum had an aura of moral authority, which made them feel unworthy of walking on the floors it maintained, and they believed the vacuum's quiet presence created a power imbalance, which, again, is a remarkable conclusion to draw from a household tool, whose biggest flex is making crumbs go away. They requested the host store the vacuum out of sight because its energy was too confrontational, and they demanded a partial refund because no guest should feel shamed by a cleaning device, proving that even dirt removal can apparently become a psychological minefield. 41. A guest once insisted the Airbnb's drinking glasses were too transparent, which they found emotionally intrusive, claiming the ability to see through them made the act of drinking feel uncomfortably revealing, and they preferred cups that maintain a respectful level of mystery. They argued the transparency forced them to confront the reality of their beverage, which is apparently unacceptable when someone wants to sip juice without acknowledging its existence. And they said the clear glass made them feel watched by the water. An impressive mental gymnastics routine. They demanded the host provide opaque emotional boundaries, perhaps unaware that drinking vessels historically have not participated in psychological privacy arrangements, and their refund request claimed excessive beverage visibility, setting a new standard for complaints that sound like performance art. 42. One visitor wrote that the Airbnb's doormat sent mixed messages because it said, "Welcome," yet the mat's bristly texture made them feel uninvited, and they accused it of being passive-aggressive decor, which is admittedly a creative literary interpretation of a fiber mat whose only job is wiping shoes. They said the mat lacked sincerity in its greeting, and argued the host should choose something that embodies hospitality more authentically, possibly forgetting that doormats are not sentient employees who undergo customer service training. They demanded a refund because the mat didn't align its behavior with its messaging, claiming the contradiction ruined the emotional tone of the entrance, and the host, likely exhausted by humanity, simply thanked them for their feedback while privately contemplating a life where people don't assign psychological motives to woven rectangles. 43. A guest once complained that the Airbnb alarm clock felt too eager because the beep sounded overly enthusiastic for such an early hour, which they found patronizing. And they said the clock seemed excited to ruin their morning, as though consumer electronics derive joy from human suffering. They argued the alarm should approach its responsibilities with humility, not celebrate the downfall of sleep. And they claimed the tone bordered on gloating, which suggests they've projected a surprising amount of emotional intention onto an object with 2 buttons and no soul. They demanded a refund for emotionally aggressive timekeeping, and recommended the host find an alarm that wakes guests respectfully, reinforcing the idea that the real problem here is less the clock and more the person who believes punctuality should be delivered with empathy. 44. One guest sent a message stating the Airbnb's hot water lacked narrative arc, explaining that the temperature rose too predictably, offering no dramatic tension, and they claimed a proper shower should have unexpected twists like a prestige TV show. They argued that consistent hot water deprived them of emotional depth and said the shower experience felt linear, which apparently is an insult now. They suggested the host introduce spontaneous temperature shifts to keep guests awake and engaged, essentially proposing the plumbing equivalent of a jump scare. The host declined, possibly on the grounds that boiling and freezing your guests intermittently is not a five-star amenity. But the guest insisted the shower lacked storytelling ambition, revealing a desire for theatrical plumbing that cannot and should not exist in a functioning society. 45. A visitor complained that the Airbnb kitchen knives were too sharp, which they believed conveyed a hostile attitude, and they felt the knives introduced unnecessary danger into the vacation narrative, claiming their mere presence created tension between guest and countertop. They insisted the host provide gentler cutlery, ideally dull enough to eliminate all risk of competence, because apparently the perfect knife is one incapable of cutting anything, including the user's will to live. They argued the knives exuded competitive energy, which made them feel challenged by the silverware, and they demanded compensation for excessive culinary intimidation, suggesting they wanted the tools of cooking to behave more like soft-spoken guidance counselors. The host explained that dull knives are more dangerous than sharp ones, but the guest insisted the knives were performing confidence too strongly, which is perhaps the strangest complaint ever made about successful craftsmanship. 46. One guest complained that the Airbnb's toilet paper tore too assertively, claiming the perforation imposed its will on them, and that the paper lacked collaborative spirit, which is an extraordinary critique of something whose entire job involves sacrificing itself. They argued the tearing pattern felt authoritarian, as though the toilet paper was enforcing rigid expectations without room for negotiation, and they suggested the host provide a brand with softer communication style, one that encourages teamwork between sheet and user. They demanded a refund for uncooperative bathroom supplies, claiming the experience strained their trust in household materials, and while the host considered replying with the phrase, "It's toilet paper," they decided silence was safer, because once a person is emotionally defeated by perforation, no amount of diplomacy can help them recover. 47. A traveler once complained that the Airbnb mirror refused to flatter them, accusing the host of installing brutally honest reflective surfaces that didn't soften the truth, and they said the mirror lacked the compassion expected from modern amenities, effectively requesting a bathroom that lies. They argued the mirror failed to collaborate on confidence and demanded one that supports the guest's self-image, perhaps forgetting that mirrors, by definition, simply show what is there. They claimed the reflection felt confrontational and insisted the host was responsible for curating a kinder visual reality, which is the hospitality equivalent of demanding the laws of optics take a day off. They requested a refund for unsympathetic accuracy, which is honestly the closest anyone has come to telling on themselves while complaining about glass. 48. A guest once filed a complaint accusing the Airbnb's thermostat of gaslighting them because the displayed temperature did not match their emotional reading of the room, as though HVAC systems are expected to calibrate themselves to human moods. They insisted the room felt like 82 degrees emotionally, even though the thermostat said 72, and they claimed the discrepancy created a breakdown in trust, which suggests they entered the home already prepared to lose an argument with a wall-mounted rectangle. They demanded the host replace the device with something more intuitive and emotionally literate, which might actually require witchcraft. The host suggested using a personal thermometer, but the guest said that wasn't necessary because they know what temperature feels like spiritually, making this complaint the world's first recorded instance of intuitive meteorology being used as a customer service weapon. 49. A particularly dramatic guest declared that the Airbnb's decorative throw blanket had secrets, stating the pattern felt cryptic, as though the woven shapes contained hidden messages meant for other guests. They said the blanket looked like it belonged to someone with unresolved history, and they insisted the host replace it with something less mysterious and more emotionally transparent, as if textiles owe us full disclosure. They claimed the blanket changed energy throughout the day, which is impressive given that blankets historically do not develop plot lines, and they demanded a refund for unannounced visual symbolism, a phrase that suggests this person would absolutely lose a fistfight with a kaleidoscope. The host considered explaining that the shapes were just shapes, but chose not to risk adding more mythology to the situation. 50. A guest once complained that the Airbnb closet felt too empty, accusing the host of failing to provide a sense of narrative possibility, and they said the vacant shelves made them confront the void of their own unfulfilled ambitions, which is an incredible amount of emotional weight to place on storage space. They argued the host should have included a few symbolic items to give the closet character development, perhaps a decorative box or a metaphorical scarf, anything to make the empty space feel less existentially hollow. And they demanded a partial refund because the closet exposed them to themes of nothingness without warning, proving that some guests don't want a place to hang their clothes, they want a set designer. The host wisely did not offer to fill the closet with props in case the guest began assigning emotional motives to those as well. 51. A guest submitted what might be the single greatest complaint ever recorded. They demanded a full refund because the Airbnb did not match the vibe they imagined while daydreaming months earlier, claiming the host had failed to honor the emotional contract of their imagination, as though a privately created fantasy constitutes legally binding architecture. They said the real house didn't feel like the place they pictured during traffic, and that the host should have anticipated the internal vision they never described, never hinted at, and possibly never truly settled on. They claimed reality should adapt to the guests' expectations, not the other way around, officially setting the high water mark for delusional entitlement, and they ended their message with the breathtaking line: "The Airbnb wasn't wrong, but it wasn't the version of wrong I wanted," which is such an immaculate collision of nonsense and poetry that it deserves to be bronzed and displayed at the entrance of every hospitality business on Earth as the final boss of refund addiction. Well, that's humanity at its most spectacularly confused. Proof that even reality has customer service issues. Now tell me, which complaint deserves a crown, a refund, or a restraining order? Drop your pick below, hit like if your brain survived, and subscribe if you want the next wave of chaos.